Welcome. So today with the Santa Barbara Foundation, we have a number of folks joining us. We have Stacy Furia. Pedro, would you go on to that next slide? There we go. We have Stacy Furia. She is our Learning and Evaluation Manager. We have Gary Clark. He is the Director of Collaboration for Social Impact, and he's working with Maria Caudillo, who's our Community Engagement Coordinator. The grant-making team is here today, composed of me at this time. Is Deanna Vallejo, who's our Community Grants Program Officer, was unable to make it today, and she'll be joined with another program officer soon as well. We will be covering our behavioral health, healthcare, food, shelter, and safety program. Again, there's a lot of friendly faces in the group. Please don't hesitate to say hello in the chat. We also have with us Petra Gomez, who is the program manager on our focus areas, and Jamie Perez, Community Engagement Coordinator. Both those staff people are located in our North County offices in Santa Maria. One very important note with us, we have Pedro Paz. Previously, you know him as the Director of Grant Making. He has moved into a new role as the Director of Policy and External Affairs. This is an important move for us in supporting the work of our sector holistically. So Pedro, I'm gonna steal that screen from you, and we're gonna get to know a little bit about who's in the group today. One of our board members is joining today, Pamela Metzel, and we welcome her. She's a new board member and learning with us all. So giving earnest thanks is quite daunting. One hopes that the words chosen really convey our sincerity. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought out the best in many people, people who've shown compassion, empathy, and offered a helping hand to others during these very extraordinary times. For many of you, though, this not only begins at home, but it also at work and in our communities, and that really shouldn't be taken for granted. We hope you're taking care of yourselves. Community-based organizations comprise many of Santa Barbara County safety net organizations, and especially over the past 2 years, it's notable that you've kept thousands of people fed, safe, and housed, and low-income communities in particular as well. Those who are also vulnerable to violence. Throughout the pandemic, nonprofits have faced decreased revenue. So what we learned is from services, about 53 organizations were impacted in revenue. Individual organizations were down for 80% of the organizations in our community, and we have over 2,000. And events were, of course, impacted. This necessitated changes in revenue mix, which meant that there was a larger reliance on government grants and relief funds coming out as COVID, which also had a learning curve for all of us on how to apply and attain those. All of this, while many cases and need and demand was increasing for about 58% of the nonprofits in our county specifically. Staff nonprofits also faced hiring and retention difficulties. These are all from that nonprofit survey, which will be published soon. And though nonprofit employment rose overall, our volunteer-led organizations were really impacted because of who could no longer volunteer at those organizations and be in the front lines. So there's no doubt that the pandemic has been a challenge for nonprofits in terms of fundraising and staffing, but amazingly, that didn't stop you from finding ways to continue to provide services. Throughout the pandemic, Santa Barbara County nonprofits have shown amazing ingenuity, innovation. We have some stories to share as part of that report, and determination to continue to achieve the mission of their organizations and serve our community. And we've just been amazed by these stories, the grit, the fortitude coming out of the social sector. Many organizations had to choose, make difficult choices to get creative, resulting in numerous program innovations, partnerships, and strategies. And these will be shared as part of that report. So we see you, we see the work you've done with individuals, with family empowerment. We see you in leadership. We see the local ownership of recovery and response and not waiting for others. We see you in the cross-sector partnerships. And, give me 1 second. All right, got into the administrative. And we see the unity and effort and flexibility and resilience. I'll pause there for 1 second if there's any questions. If not, I'll move on to the goals of the day. All right, not seeing any questions. Today we have an hour, so we will cover the community grant programs. Those are the big buckets. They have the behavioral health, healthcare, food, shelter, and safety. We'll also cover the competitive donor-directed grant programs that include our environmental, senior programs, and others. We'll cover the foundation focus areas. This has childcare, workforce development, and housing. We will not be covering the small capacity building grant program today, but Gary is with us here today. And Jamie will share a link where you can find all the information. That grant has launched and it has the same mechanisms as it has for the last few years. It's available monthly and Gary's available for any questions. So we won't be covering SCBG today in the interest of time, and that not much has changed. We are in the 4th year of our strategic plan as the Santa Barbara Foundations, and our priorities are the same. We are continuing to support basic needs and working families. If anything, we've adapted to the context and leaned into each of the areas as part of recovery and rebuilding from the pandemic. In the chat, you will also find a link to a folder. That folder has the handouts for today, including all the links that'll be shared. When you have a chance, pop into that folder. It's in our Microsoft Office shared files. It'll be available for 2 weeks, but also a video will be posted of this event if you want to share with colleagues, and it'll be timestamped by the programs that we talk about. All of the information we're providing you will be available on our website as well. Petra will be speaking to focus areas today: childcare, workforce development, and housing. And lastly, this is a lot to cover, we will touch on a new user-friendly platform for grant making. Thank you for bearing with us, our custom-made Spectrum site, which is, I have to say, best for that platform. But we are also at this point migrating some of our grant programs. They'll transition over time, and our website will direct you to the right portal for each grant program. Our community grant programs consist of 3 programs this year: behavioral health, healthcare, food, shelter, and safety. As behavioral health and healthcare services continue to be integrated to promote better health outcomes, the foundation is combining the health and healthcare grant cycle into one. So those of you that are here with the healthcare and behavioral health programs and have demonstrated that integration, you will not have to choose. There's a question in the Slido portion of our poll on whether there'll be another recovery grant. Pedro will speak to that at a later point. The healthcare behavioral health grant program, food, shelter, and safety are designed to support agencies providing behavioral health services and healthcare services and programs. And I will be the primary point of contact for that grant program. And in my absence, you'll always have Deanna Vallejo available to you. And we are implementing a LOI process, and I'll cover that soon. The food program focuses primarily on direct services, but also coordination around food, as does shelter and safety. Shelter and safety means it has the wraparound services that allow people to retain and be in a safe sheltered space, and also provide for emergency shelters. Grants will be available to nonprofit organizations directly providing grants for the area in which they applied. And funding will be used for operating expenses or costs related to sustained or expanding service delivery programs to meet the demand. So these general operating support really give you a great opportunity to increase your ability to have flexible funding on where it's needed, when it's needed. I won't read off too many things on the slide, but we of course focus on direct service, well-managed and financially viable organizations. This does not mean you have to be large. This just means there has to be good practices or intent to do so in place. And we'll talk about capacity development in those areas as well. And of course, having developed strategies for addressing identified organizational needs, we highly encourage that we are always looking inward as we're looking outward for the organization and individual's health. And so where there are efforts to improve, let's say, your governance structure, DEIA efforts, evaluation, financial or business modeling, we want to hear about those. These are the priority areas. I won't read through all of them, so we have enough time for Q&A. And there will be all of these materials are available in the folder. We have another question in Slido. Does this mean there will no longer be education and childcare grants? Absolutely not. We're just starting here. Petra will talk about the scholarships and childcare grants and when and where they're launching. And we also have education and youth behavioral health opportunities through our COVID-19 grant programs. This is really important. In shelter and safety specifically, we are focusing on, because we have a lot of data, around high priority subpopulations, families with children. We've seen an increase in aging population who are unsheltered, individuals and families living in cars, many of whom are employed, people with disabilities, individuals fleeing from domestic violence and sex trafficking, and youth who are homeless. So these will be the priority areas. It does not mean that it will not include all of our other high need, all of our population as well. So this is a big part of what we're doing, why we're doing, and what we've learned. We are changing just the behavioral health, food, shelter and safety, and healthcare grants, just the three I've spoken about, into a 2-year grant program. Grant amounts will be up to $30,000 for up to 2 years each if they're awarded in full request. This year, we're also launching an RFQ process. On March 1st, this is a very short application, also in the folder with all the questions. If there's any small changes, they'll be insignificant. For you to prepare for very early if you like to plan a month ahead. But that RFQ process will open on March 1st and close on March 30th. So you'll have an entire month for those 3 grant programs to submit that RFQ. Then we will come back and invite organizations to apply in April with a grant deadline for May 11th. Funds will be awarded in August 2020. By RFQ, it's like a request for qualifications, but a very short application with more about you as an organization. This will also give you an opportunity to build your profile on Smart Simple. That's the new grant platform that we're moving to. This will save time. Oh, thank you, Lauren, for everyone. It allows us to, so that all of you aren't filling in the massive grant, not massive, but the larger grant application if it isn't of competitive nature for the pool. We look at the conditions in place. We look at the portfolio at large. We also look at organizations of multiple sizes with potential to do what they're doing, sustain what they're doing, expand what they're doing, but also be those critical providers that have access to populations that other larger organizations may not. So this will allow an ample amount of time to do in something like, it's like a LOI, but it's just questions, Q&A. 6 of the 9 questions are multiple choice or yes or no. 3 of them are open-ended, so it'll be quite easy. All right, so before I turn this over to Gary to talk about the capacity building effort that we're rolling into the 2-year grant program, do you have any questions or concerns? Oh, we thought that would be a little harder. Well, I'm glad this really is intended from the feedback that we've gotten from all of you. It allows for more stability with funding over 2 years rather than applying annually. And with rolling in some of our capacity development effort, we hope to help you achieve your mission at no cost to you with the capacity development piece plus the grant making. So Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Everybody, before I get started, there's a question in chat that asks is the 30K, is it per year or 15K per year?
Ah, good question. It's up to 30K per year for 2 years.
Okay, great. For many of you already know about the Collaboration for Social Impact, but I just wanted to point out on our homepage where in the navigation you can find the web pages for the CSI. I encourage you to check those pages out. But at a high level, I just want to make sure that you all know that the CSI is focused on strengthening the nonprofit sector through investments in capacity building and professional development opportunities, as well as advocacy based on research and analysis of our sector's health. So I can't stress enough, please check out those web pages because there's lots of content there that I think will be helpful. And next slide. And so I do want to highlight some of the offerings that are already in the works. Many of you already know about the Small Capacity Building Grant Program. I encourage any and all to reach out to me in advance of applying so I can help guide you in addition to the guidelines and criteria. We also launched, we are in the process of launching the Board Leadership Institute, and we are still accepting applications for that. The deadline is noon on next Friday on the 18th. So please check with your board members and see if that might be something you all want to participate in. Again, many of you know about Leading from Within. They have exceptional leadership development programs to encourage folks to hopefully plug their staff and their potential leaders into some of those programs. And then also on those web pages for the CSI, we have curated a directory of nonprofit sector resources. We did it early on in the pandemic for COVID-specific resources. And now we have a directory of general nonprofit sector resources. Next slide. And hopefully, most of you saw in your inbox in the last week an email from NPRN announcing a bit of a transition. With Pam Lewis's retirement from Hutton Parker Foundation, a few of us got together and decided, all right, let's see how we can govern this moving forward to make sure that it stays robust and continues to enhance the offerings. And so we have launched a steering committee that is made up of Pam herself. Thankfully, she's willing to stay on. Kristen Sullivan of the Tobes Foundation, Emily Newman of the Paul and Patricia Bragg Foundation, Ernesto Paredes of Easy Lift. And then the steering committee will be co-chaired by myself and Patricia Solario of the Fund for Santa Barbara. We just launched a survey to hopefully get some feedback from all the users on how we might be able to improve the platform. That survey closes on Monday, so please look for it in your inbox and we'd love to hear from you. Next slide. Okay, so what's upcoming? So Rubai just covered the advantages of multi-year grant making. Coupled with that, we know that the nonprofits, especially in this time, need capacity development. We heard from you through our grant convenings and our survey, our SCBG applications and reports, that selected capacity development needs are still widespread. So we will share more as part of the grant making process, but we will be asking for input from applicants during this process on capacity building offerings such as cohort-based technical assistance, as well as one-on-one coaching in areas such as DEIA strategies, program evaluation, financial literacy, business model, and scenario planning. And I just have to say how grateful I am that we had a donor come forward and say, hey, we think the nonprofits really need some capacity development support. And so we're just really, really grateful to that donor to investing in capacity development to support our strategic priorities. And then lastly, as Rubai mentioned, we are about to go live with the final report, State of Nonprofits in the Santa Barbara County. So please look for that in the coming weeks. And I just want to thank everybody who completed the Nonprofit Leader Survey back last summer. And we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that report. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Rubai, or is it Petra next?
We'll go to Petra. Oh, no, we'll go to, yes, perfect.
Petra.
Good morning, everyone. We're so happy to have you join us this morning. I'm going to be providing some information on our focus areas. which are part of our strategic plan and include childcare, workforce development, and housing. So these grant programs are focused on supporting vulnerable populations and our working families by increasing affordable and accessible childcare opportunities, along with building job skills through effective workforce development and housing. Under our childcare areas, our goals are to support 0 to 5 school-age childcare, along with maintaining family childcare providers and centers open and supporting their reopening, along with building on innovation and expansion of the childcare sector in Santa Barbara County to meet the growing needs. To support these goals, we have the following grants under childcare, which include William and Lottie Daniel Fund Childcare Scholarships. This program launches on March 7th, 2022, and its deadline is April 4th. And the maximum amount for this grant is $35,000. If you have any questions about your project or your eligibility, you can always reach out to me and we can discuss your project. For childcare, the Childcare Grant Program, this used to be the Early Care and Education ECE Grant Program, which we have renamed the Childcare Program. This launches August 22nd. It's in the fall. And again, similar to any of our other grants, you're encouraged to reach out with any proposals and we can discuss your eligibility and your project before submitting a grant. And the types of grants that we've supported under our Child Care Grant Program have been leadership and professional development and family engagement programs. Under our workforce development area, this area is by invitation and we encourage meetings to discuss any potential projects. We have curated our donor funds as part of workforce development projects. So if you had previously applied for any of our workforce development projects, again, you're encouraged to reach out to me with any questions. The maximum grant award varies for workforce development and workforce housing. And under our workforce development area, our goals are to retain and increase the childcare workforce in Santa Barbara County, increase qualified labor force in target industries in North County, and develop a regional plan for workforce development. The type of programs we funded this past year were the County COVID-19 Impact Report, and Jamie will be including a link on our chat to the Workforce Development Report, and Partners in Education's Job Readiness Program, which are internships for youth with the focus on North County, and the Hancock CTE Ambassador and Non-Credit Community Navigator Program. Under housing, we had an adjustment as the result of COVID with recent grants for housing loss prevention, and we funded the Housing Trust Fund for North County Outreach for their loan program. And we encourage you to reach out to me with any project ideas. And again, for any of our childcare, workforce development, or housing grants, you're advised to email me, call me before drafting your application. This information with deadlines and launch dates are on our website. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And my colleague, Jamie Perez, is also available to answer any technical questions. Thank you. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rubai.
Thank you so much. As questions pop up in the chat, Jamie's going to compile them. And once we get through the programs, we'll try to address them all. If not, again, please reach out to us. We're on the staff page of the Santa Barbara Foundation, and you can find us here, first initial, last name at sbfoundation.org. I'm going to talk a little about some of the additional grant programs available from the Santa Barbara Foundation. It'll be important to always go back to our website for details and contact information. And like in any grant program, we always encourage you to speak with the program officer, the person that's on that grant program prior to submitting. It just helps with focusing into the grant program if you have any questions that are technical, so there's no last minute frustrations with new tools or the intent of the grant. So the TOBS Fund for Performing Arts has been available for years. At this time, Jessica Sanchez still remains as the primary contact. The application deadline for that is March 25th. We have another donor-related grant program run by a donor committee, which is the Senior Programs of Santa Barbara. Those application deadlines are yet to be determined, so please go ahead and make sure you are on our grants opportunities page on our website. The TCBB, Tri-Counties Blood Bank Fund, is back to its original balance and we'll be able to return to doing the same amount of grants as we've done in the previous years. The deadline for this is September 9th, and Deanna Vallejo will be your point of contact. Conservation Environment Public Trails Grant Program. This is a wonderful new program that Pedro Paz led in its first year last year. The deadline for this grant program is August 19th. He'll have other staff as he's transitioning in the role to support him. So finding out who that point of contact will be in this grant program, just stay on the site or contact Pedro. And this one is for a South County to Mid-County focus all the way up through county-wide eligibility. Multiple donors have given to this one, and we are really pleased to be able to offer this, especially at this time. Pedro, I'm going to turn it over to you on the COVID-19 recovery and rebuilding.
Right now, we're in the process of looking at what areas we're going to focus on for COVID-19 recovery and rebuilding. We have a little bit of funding left over. Our thought right now at this point in time is we might go out and reach out to certain organizations that are still serving a very important need in our community. We're kind of in the process of aggregating some information, some data internally to figure out what areas we're going to focus on. But more than likely going to continue to support the areas we last did, which were around senior isolation, behavioral health, childcare, housing loss prevention, and maybe some other areas that we're looking at. If you have any questions about this or just thoughts about it, or you're seeing something in your particular area that is continuing to impact our community as a whole, go ahead and reach out to me. My contact information is obviously on the screen. The one thing I would say is, as you can see, I'm still involved with some grant making. You haven't gotten rid of me yet, so I guess that's a good thing. So go ahead and reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions, especially if you're interested in either of those grant programs. I can definitely talk to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pedro. We'll go on to that next slide. Sorry you're having to hear from me so much. It's only because Dee is absent. Otherwise, we'd have the lovely Deanna Vallejo on these topics. So Smart Simple Portal. This is a new platform that's going to be launched in March. This is a very user-friendly platform, but there will be transition over the year. We know that the first grant opportunity, your food, shelter, behavioral health, healthcare, will be offered on this platform. So in March, when you do the request for qualifications, the RFQ, you log in and it'll ask you to create a profile. The platform will assist in streamlining all grant application submission, and all organizations will need to create a new profile, but you'll also have ownership of all of the content, which is really simple to navigate. It'll also give you status updates and where you are and ability to contact us. This will only prompt you to update your profile when you are applying for new grant programs, but you won't have to re-enter that information. Just check that it is still correct. The DEIA questions will be fairly new to you, but you've seen them embedded, sprinkled, I want to say, throughout our programs. We are doing a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and access at the Santa Barbara Foundation, and we'd like to learn and grow with you. So you will find in creating an organizational profile that we've added several DEIA questions. And if you have concerns, please contact us or contact Dee Vallejo at SB Foundation with filling out that process. We hope it'll be helpful to you in just thinking through your processes as well. And lastly, this platform enables our grantees to have their own space to navigate, check the status, submit requests, recall an application, make changes before the deadline, etc. So eventually all grants will move to this platform, including the Small Capacity Building Grants Program. Our grants opportunities webpage, which Jamie will post in chat, will clearly direct you by each grant program on where you need to apply as we make this transition. A how-to video will be posted on our website with detailed instructions, but it's fairly intuitive, and on how to register, and just to give us about 24 hours to make sure all the registration goes through. And Deanna is available for technical assistance, and please don't hesitate to reach out to her. Well, thank you for bearing with us. We think you'll enjoy the platform. We believe the 2-year grant program will be very helpful for those basic need areas. And we really appreciate you working with us through this transition. I will pause there for any questions specifically on the Smart Simple platform. All right. And you don't have to worry about which one to use. If you start with our website, go to the grant program, it'll navigate you to the right space. All right, so I'll turn this over to final reporting and grants with Jamie and Stacy.
Hi. For our 3 community grant programs, behavioral health and healthcare, food, and shelter and safety, we developed an evaluation framework with input from nonprofits and government. The evaluation questions will be shared early on in the grant making process. So don't stress out. You'll know ahead of time what you'll need to do to report back to us. And grantees will be able to select from a menu of measures that matter to you, and you will be accountable for tracking only those selected and agreed upon measures. Jamie will now review how to access reports for different grant programs.
Good morning. So I'm here to fill you in on reporting. Reporting may take many forms, including but not limited to surveys, convenings, written reports, and/or interviews. Please refer to your award letter or the grants report page of the website for reporting requirements. Failure to fulfill reporting requirements may result in rejection of subsequent grant applications. So we really encourage you to complete those early and get those into us by those deadlines. Report forms are located on the Foundation's website as well as through the grants portal. If unique circumstances exist, which we understand, the grantee should immediately consult with the appropriate community engagement team member to request an extension or alternative option for fulfilling the reporting requirement before the deadline. We welcome and encourage open communication throughout the grant cycle, and we're available to address your questions or concerns by phone, by email. If you're not sure which team member to contact, you can always reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you to the correct person. As we transition to Smart Simple, some grant opportunities will still live in our original grants portal. So please refer to our website on how to apply to each cycle, as Rubai mentioned. And then lastly, please keep in mind that registration for the grant portal may still take up to 24 hours. So please be mindful of application deadlines when setting up your new login. Thank you for your time. And with that, I believe we're going to move into the Q&A portion of the meeting.
Yeah.
Rubai, can I quickly add 2 things that I was thinking about as we were going through? Please. One is for grant opportunities, please follow us on social media. We have some links on our webpage. Also a great source of information for other things that we're doing at the Foundation. But it's also kind of it's kind of a passive way to get information from us rather than going to our website and looking at all the opportunities are on the webpage. But you can always rely on that if you wanted to. And the second thing I wanted to note, especially around reporting, is if you have two individuals for your contact information and those 2 individuals leave, it's super important to transition those individuals to the new people. And if one person is sort of the one that's being relied on for information and contact information for your organization, and no one's monitoring that email, you'll miss it. So please do that. That's super important too as well. Or you'll miss a deadline or you'll miss something that we're asking you to do. So please do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Those were important. Jamie, I'm just going to dive into a Slido question, which I have open. For the 2-year grants, are the reports due annually or after the 2-year period to complete? We will be working with you throughout those 2 years. So we will be interacting. There will be a communication survey and or gathering, depending on the interest of the group, towards the end of the first year. That reporting requirement will need to be met for renewal. It would really take an egregious violation for a renewal to not happen, but we of course want to work with you. It's also a great touch point in case there's a substantial change in the organization. And then we're able to work with you so the grant received can be applied in the ways that are most useful for the organization. One more thing on reporting as it relates to questions as well and surveys. Those of you who were in the Food, Shelter, and Safety Grant Program in December are eligible to apply in this year, and your award letters give you an early reporting opportunity to do so. Are all grants going to be on the 2-year cycle? No, just the food, shelter, safety, behavioral health, and healthcare. That's food, shelter, safety, behavioral health, and healthcare. The first that we're going to launch at that size will be on the 2-year cycle. All right, Jamie. Sorry, I took those over because I know you can't see the Slido ones. Oh, I really need to discourage people from using them.
I can see those as well, Rubai.
Oh, you can see those?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. So why don't I turn it over to you, and maybe you could group a few questions for us, and then we hope to get to them all.
So we have, hang on one second.
While she's doing that, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that during the application process for our multi-year grants, well, actually for all of them, we're really going to be asking the applicants to prioritize what your capacity building needs are. So that'll help us prioritize our capacity building investments. So just pay close attention to the application process and the information that we're asking for around capacity building, because we really want to hear from you what your priorities are. Okay, thanks. Back to you, Jamie.
My apologies. Sorry, we're here live in the office, so I had to run to the door. So the next question from the Slido was, can an organization be a collaborative partner in more than one ask?
Heather, you'll have to correct me on practice, as I'm acting director of grant making this year, but you may apply for one grant program that aligns most with your core mission of those 3. And you may apply as a fiscal agent on behalf of a collaborative or another organization. Now, Pedro, will that span over multiple areas, food, shelter, safety? Okay.
Yeah, it does. And the other thing to note too is that you could be a partner on another grant, like a subcontractor, not the lead, and that's fine too as well. So you don't have to be worried about that part.
Wonderful, thank you.
And then as a follow-up, is there a certain amount of money available for each area of the community grants? Are applications from the healthcare, behavioral health competing with food and shelter and safety?
Is there a certain amount of money available for each of the community grants? So it is allocated, it has every year, it'll be up to the maximum amount of $30,000 per organization for each of those areas per year. I don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, I think what the question is whether there's a pool of money for each of the areas, and the answer is yes, there's a pool of money for each of the areas, like we have in the past. It does, if you allow me to answer the question, Rubai, okay. It does vary each year, because part of our work that we do on the foundation side is to try to fundraise as much as possible for each of the areas. And sometimes we do a really great job and you get more money and we put more money out on the street. So,
you know, that's a great opportunity to note the work of our philanthropic services department. They're not present in this 1 hour event because there is so much to cover, but they actively fundraise as we, before and as we are doing our grant making, allowing us to meet sometimes ambitious targets for each of those grant areas. We do have a minimum. We try not to go under unless there's, of course, disastrous market crises. We were able to maintain the grant amount for all of the basic need grant programs over the last few years, and we'll do so again this year. So there'll be no changes for the full sum.
Next question, let me try to rephrase this. Regarding the RFQ, is the criteria the same as it has been previously? For example, wanting to know programs needs and who is served and the goals.
The request for qualification questions in the community folder are much simpler than that, getting to know the organization and its purpose. In the application, we will be asking questions that are similar to the ones we had in the past, but the three differences that you'll see. One is the DEIA emphasis. Two is we're going to try and break down by population types. We've noticed in our fundraising that government and other major funders, national funders, are looking for exact populations served. And three is geography. You might see a few more cities broken down in Santa Barbara County than you have before. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, and then I think we kind of touched on this, but again, can an organization serve as a lead applicant in more than one grant area and or submit more than one program grant within a particular area?
Not more than one program grant within a particular area. You can submit one for yourself and one as a representative of a collaborative or as a fiscal agent for another on behalf of another organization. So 2 in total.
And I would add, you can't apply for behavioral health and then come back and reapply for shelter and safety. No, you have to apply for one of those areas.
And then changing gears a little bit, could the workforce development and workforce housing grant go towards teachers who work for Storyteller who have had a hard time affording housing in Santa Barbara?
Jamie, Adrian and I connected via the chat. She's going to be reaching out to me when she has a proposed idea. And so again, if you have any ideas or questions, feel free to reach out directly and we can go ahead and explore your proposal before submitting an application. Thank you.
And then the last question I have is, who should we contact to change our organization's contact person?
You will be able to do that on Smart Simple, but Deanna Vallejo, dvallejo at sbfoundation.org.
And it looks like that's all the questions that I see in the chat. And that was it from the Slido. So
I can fill a little bit of time in case some more questions pop in, just with a quick highlight of the Small Capacity Building Grant Program. As Petra was saying, for her programs, we like to communicate with you before you apply, just to help you to make sure that your idea or your project is going to be competitive. So don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Maria to ask, if, say you have 3 projects that you are considering for a Small Capacity Building Grant Program, you can draft, a couple sentences about each one and email either me or Maria, and we can give you some preliminary feedback to help you prioritize those projects as far as how well they'll compete in the cycle. And just a reminder, the deadline for the Small Capacity Building Grant Program is the first Monday of every month, February through November, with the exception of July and September. And that's because usually, or sometimes, the 4th of July and Labor Day land on that Monday. So then it's Tuesday. So, and I think that's all I need to say about SCBG.
115 people cannot be this efficient on a Thursday morning. So are there any questions? Just speak up if you don't want to type.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd rather speak than type. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm just wondering, I always hear a lot about, food and shelter and for the direct service and safety grant. How does my organization's service of providing direct resource supportive clothing interact with that? Is that something that I would qualify for?
I think it would be best to have a longer conversation around there because you also have a geographic reach. So one of the areas we look for are underserved areas in the Santa Barbara County, underserved populations. And because it supports with the people who are at risk of losing housing as well, because there is financial instability. Sorry, I know the organization quite well. I think it'll be good to have a longer conversation in terms of before you submit the requests for qualifications. Maybe you and I can connect, or
I love that.
Yeah, or Deanna will be, I'll be gone for a few days, but Deanna will be here to also answer those questions.
All right,
yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. We really want to make sure that there's a lot of variety of work that we do here. And when there isn't one avenue, it's very likely there is another avenue to work with the Santa Barbara Foundation, whether it's through capacity development, working with our donor groups, educating us so we can work with our funders to educate them of the work that you're doing. So you all have our contact information. To be able to improve this process, we will be putting a survey out to everyone that's participating. It's a very short survey. It's really helped us improve the sessions. We, of course, miss our road show. We used to go to 3 to 4 sites across the county. And pandemic permitting, we will be doing that again next year and get to meet you all in person even before that. So Stacey's popped a quick Qualtrics survey. It'll help us improve our sessions and get information to you on what's useful and what's not. Again, thank you for spending your Thursday morning with us. We know you're incredibly busy and hope you're taking care of yourselves. We'll hang out for a few minutes if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, please have a wonderful day.
You know, I just am seeing Diane Smith's question. Diane, you're still on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who do we reach regarding getting clarification as to which grant we should be applying for based on the service our organization provides?
Okay.
So for behavioral health, healthcare type of services would be Deanna Vallejo or myself. Food and shelter will be Deanna Vallejo. So that's dvallejo@sbfoundation.org. Jamie, would you pop her email into the chat? For all of the other grant programs on the Grant Opportunities website, each grant program is associated with a name. And you can just contact any one of us. It's a distributed workload and many of us cross-train. We'll get you to the right person.
And then Pedro, Heather Stevenson has a question. Can you say more about the COVID money, how much you still have, or how or if we can apply for it, and how many grants you think you might award?
That's a good question. It depends on sort of where we go with that and how many organizations we reach out to. I don't have a specific number in terms of how much we have because we're kind of still figuring that piece out. But it's not a whole bunch of money, and it's definitely not what we were doing at the peak of the pandemic. But if you just have specific questions, please reach out to me. If you're interested or you have some thoughts or ideas, go ahead and just shoot me an email. Give me some thoughts. Yeah.
This is very much to do with the COVID-19 joint effort with the 37 foundations. As that came towards an end towards recovery, the Santa Barbara Foundation has continued to fundraise. So we don't want to lock ourselves into a number that Jackie might be fundraising as we speak. So we want to make sure that we just get all the money out the door as soon as possible for recovery and rebuilding. And there's 4 priority areas that Pedro mentioned, and he'll be able to share those with you. Thank you, Diane. All right, if there are not any more questions, we'll close here. Staff, if you can stay on, that'll be great. Thank you.